Quickly before I start this video, I just want to thank Random Gaming in HD and his amazing community for their support on my last video. But above all, I appreciate all the supportive comments you guys left me, and I really enjoyed discussing PC hardware and gaming with you. Thanks again. Now onto today's video. Microsoft's Surface Pro 4 is a tablet PC designed for the artist on the go. A few years back I picked one up for around £300 including the type cover and pen, as I wanted something that could run applications such as Photoshop and Lightroom for my daily photo editing, which it handles pretty well. This particular model features a 2.3 inch touchscreen, Intel i5-6300U, dual-core 4-thread CPU, with integrated HD 520 graphics, 4GB of DDR3 and a 128GB SSD. But despite its intended purpose, I wanted to see how well it could run games. So to start, can it run Crysis? Yes it can, but don't expect maximum performance. Running on the lowest settings at 720p, we got 65 FPS on average with a 1% low of 20. Visuals do take a noticeable hit, but playing on a small laptop screen the game still looks good, especially for its age. Gameplay felt relatively smooth with the occasional stutters throughout, however, as some of you may know, Crysis freezes for a split second or two when saving. This seems to be reflected in the 1% low values. Overall, a pretty good start. Next up we have the original version of Skyrim. Skyrim Special Edition is likely too much for the system. Using the low preset at 720p, we got 59 FPS on average with a 1% low of 26. Bear in mind, like many Bethesda games, Skyrim is capped at 60 FPS. This can be unlocked, however this may cause further bugs and glitches to an already glitchy game. We still love it though. Yeeting NPCs off mountaintops is smooth enough with some occasional FPS drops throughout. This would happen anytime a dragon showed up or if there were a lot of particle effects or sweet rolls on screen at once. Fallout New Vegas ran at 1080p on the low preset. On average we saw 59 FPS with a near identical 1% low to Skyrim with 25 FPS. Not bad considering the higher resolution. Thankfully this classic Obsidian RPG was more than playable on this hardware. The overall gameplay was smooth with some occasional stutters, but still a better experience than Fallout 76. The worst performing game tested today was Spec Ops The Line. With everything set to the lowest settings possible running at 720p, we got just 40 FPS on average and a 1% low of 23. With some pretty noticeable stutters throughout, the game seemed to be having as much of an existential crisis as Captain Walker. However, if you're fine capping the frame rate to 30, you will still get a decent gaming experience. Next we have 2013's Tomb Raider. We were able to push the settings a little at 720p using the normal preset. With an average of 58 FPS and a respectable 1% low of 38 FPS, gameplay felt smooth throughout. And despite the lower resolution, the game still looked great on the smaller screen of the Surface Pro 4. Overall, I was very happy with how it performed. Far Cry 2 is next, set to low at 720p. Running on DX9, we got an average of 66 FPS with a 1% low of 39. I did notice some occasional stutters, but for the most part Far Cry 2 ran very well at these settings. You could up the resolution to 1080p, however the performance hit is quite substantial with less than 30 FPS in most scenarios. Kingdoms of Amular ran very well at 1080p with the lowest graphical settings. With an average of 79 FPS and a 1% low of 51 FPS, for the most part you could comfortably play at a locked 60. This often overlooked RPG runs very well with no noticeable FPS dips or stutters to be seen, making for a smooth gameplay experience. Back in the day when BioWare made some of the best RPGs ever, the Mass Effect trilogy was and still is a much loved franchise. The last in the series of the Mass Effect games worth talking about is Mass Effect 3. But unfortunately it was only just about playable at the lowest settings at 720p. With 49 FPS on average and a 1% low at 29 FPS, things seemed fine. However, gameplay felt juddery and, with some pretty frequent fluctuations in frame rate, this for me felt borderline unplayable. Capping the frame rate to 30 FPS improved gameplay somewhat, but there was just something not quite right about the way the game played. In this case, you would have a better experience on last gen consoles. Next up we have a real classic, GTA Vice City, and despite its age it's still a really fun game to play. Running at 1080p with draw distance set to max, we got 110 FPS on average with a 1% low of 64. Gameplay was smooth and no stutters or FPS dips, and was the only game that ran at the Surface Pro's native resolution. At 2736 by 1824, GTA Vice City still ran very well with 69 FPS on average. The 1% low of 30 FPS shows where the bump in resolution starts to really stress out integrated graphics. However, it is still more than playable at this resolution. And if GTA San Andreas is more of your cup of tea, this hardware is more than capable of running it at 1080p too. And finally we have CSGO set to the lowest settings at 720p. With an average of 80 FPS on the Surface, performance seems excellent. However, there was some significant stuttering throughout with a 1% lower 14 frames per second. This is less than ideal for a competitive shooter like CSGO, but will more than likely suffice for more casual players. Overall performance was a little disappointing. CSGO is a relative CPU intensive game, so poor performance here is likely due to a severe CPU bottleneck. So to conclude, gaming on a low powered tablet PC is possible. However, it's not the smoothest experience ever. You will have to make some sacrifices to resolution and graphical fidelity in most games, even older titles. Unfortunately, it's not possible to upgrade the components in many products like the Surface Pro, so the performance you see here is as good as you're gonna get. You don't necessarily need a gaming laptop either. If you want a portable PC for gaming and productivity, keep an eye out for the ones with Ryzen APUs or discrete graphics. And try to find a laptop with at least 8 gigs of RAM, and an SSD is recommended for the best gaming experience. Alternatively, just buy Nintendo Switch Lite if gaming is all you want to do on the go. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you found it somewhat interesting or useful. Leave a like if you did, and hopefully I will see you all in the next one.